Hello and welcome back to another edition of Lay It on the Table. This is episode number 4. Can you believe that we've been doing this now for 8 weeks?
Episode 4.
I know.
I feel very young still.
I know, but still, I mean, it's on the one hand, it's only episode 4, but on the other hand, oh my gosh, it's episode 4. We've been doing this for 8 weeks. A
Sweet.
skill is developed by repetition. And speaking of which, we're trying to get better with the sound, folks. We have gone from using OBS and some other tools to trying Riverside FM. This is our second time on Riverside FM. I let their auto magic sound balancer kind of work, and then when I listened to the final recording on Anchor and Spotify and Apple, it just seemed a little, I don't know, tinny, distorted to me. So I'm working on that. So thank you so much for your patience as we kind of work through the technical aspects of how to produce a podcast when this is not your full-time job and you're just really talking about a passion, more so than technical expertise. Maybe I can get our friends from our
Well, and
go ahead.
Just to sort of piggyback on that just a little bit, I just want everybody to know that you, Joe, are the technical wizard here. So,
hey, you're the one with the PhD.
Which doesn't make me a wizard.
I have a post hole digger. That's a PhD, right?
Oh, that's always good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if only we had 2 friends in our D&D game that were, sound engineers by profession. If only. I have to talk to them about that. Okay, so lots of things to cover. We actually have a I'm going to call it a fan favorite question. But before we get to that, I did want to start off by talking about the games we've played. So James, I'm going to let you kick that off. What games have you been playing lately?
Yeah, because it's really been just been one game on the table for the past 2 weeks or so. The end of the semester was happening, a whole lot of stress and grading and all of that. So it was easy enough to just sit down and play Quacks of Quedlinburg again and again and again.
I'm totally not surprised. We love that game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of low cognitive overhead. And we keep going through the different books, the setup of what the little chips mean. And it's just been super fun, very relaxing. I expect we'll start getting other stuff back in the rotation soon, but for now, all Quacks all the time.
I totally get that.
What about you?
Well, I was going to say, I totally get that because, number one, we've been finishing up some projects around the house, some drywall work. So you can imagine there's dust everywhere. And plus we had Mother's Day over the time frame. So the girls were actually home. And they wanted to play Isle of Cats. And so we've had Isle of Cats on the table for a little bit over a week, and we've gotten some games in. And, it's been kind of fun for me because I generally play Isle of Cats one way. I want to fill up. Okay. I want to fill it up. I'm not a big person who uses the lesson cards. And every time I lose to my wife, it's because she's the master of the lesson cards. And so I decided to use this marathon of Isle of Cats to change my strategy around, to do things that I would not normally do, just to see how it impacted the game. And I got to tell you, I have had the higher scores I've ever had in Isle of Cats because I started paying attention to the lesson cards. And I'm sure that, and making different choices, like investing money up front in an Oshak card or a Rare Treasures card, and saving the greens and, trying to get a permanent basket. All these strategies, I've always just focused on get the cats, which is funny because I'm allergic to cats. But anyway, different story. So Isle of Cats and of course, every time I think of that wonderful YouTube video from the Gregory brothers where the girl that goes, I love cats, they auto-tuned her years ago. I will have to send you that, and I'll probably have to put it on a link somewhere below. It's very funny. Anyway, enough about that. But I was in the game store this week, and of course, everybody knows who listens to the show with any regularity. When I say game store, I'm referring to Carolina Tabletop Games on Main Street in Pineville, North Carolina. Rob Ross, proprietor.
All right.
No endorsements have been paid. And so Rob was unpacking his shipment, and I was noticing a couple of things.
Okay.
So he got in a stack of Parks and Parks Nightfall. And I was watching him put the prices on it, and I noticed that the price of Parks is now gone up about 10%. And And I was picking on him a little bit, saying, "Oh, I see how it is. You think just because there's inflation, you can raise the prices." And he's like, "Hey, I'm raising prices to you because the prices got raised to me." And so I'm not complaining in any way, shape, or form, because I feel like it's very important to support your friendly local game store, and it's only like a difference of $3 to $4. But it was just something I had noticed that he was, number one, I've noticed that the supply is coming back in, but I've noticed that it's a little bit more expensive. And I think the first I really noticed was he had gotten in a copy of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is a game that just really intrigues me. It's currently clocking in at around $100, $106, something like that. And it's a beefy, heavy game. It's got a ton of miniatures in it.
Right.
And it's very much an RPG-ish kind of game where the way the mechanics of the game go when you spawn monsters, it can be very different. I haven't played it. I've watched some reviews. I haven't pulled the trigger on it for a variety of reasons. But it's just a game that intrigues me. Are you familiar with that game at all?
I am not. No.
Yeah, number one, that sort of American Gothic kind of storytelling is just something that my wife and I really enjoyed. And so something built on the premise of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is already intriguing to me. But I encourage you to check it out and see what you think on looking at some of the reviews. I will probably eventually pull the trigger on it. It's just one of those games that we generally like to have games like that for when we get into the cooler fall months and approaching Halloween. That's when we pull out Haunted Mansion. Sure. That's when we pull out Horrified, and the Scooby-Doo Betrayal on the House on the Hill, because we haven't got the other version.
Nice. Well, and that's something we could probably talk about at some point is, games for particular seasons. I used to do this for game nights at my house back in the day, and we'd say, okay, so this is going to be the game night for this, and always the October game night was going to have, Cthulhu games and all of that kind of stuff. So that makes perfect sense, and it would be a fun thing to what do you do for December?
Yeah, and it's funny. I got a few Christmas games that are Christmas themed games, like
right.
The Ghost of Christmas was one that came in, but it came in after Christmas. So I'm leaving it shrink wrapped because I don't even want to pull it out till I get to the season, because now it's like not in the mood. And 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, we did the Christmas Carol RPG one-off or one-shot.
The one-shot, yep.
Yeah, that was. And this year I tried to find something this year for the group that was a little different, the Krampus lore.
Yes, that was pretty fun.
It was fun, but it was, we stuck it in the middle of a campaign. Yeah. That was a lot of fun anyway. But, I was just noticing that, how the inflation, we see it in the grocery store, we see it in places like that. And really was just the first time I noticed it in the game store. And I was just curious if you.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about. One of the things I'm thinking about that too is that we've seen games get bigger and bigger with more miniatures. A lot of the stuff coming through Kickstarter, and I think other traditional publishers sort of going with bigger, more expensive games. And I think now that's going to be interesting with the inflation hitting so strangely, or hard rather. If we're going to see games start shrinking again, just to keep the price down, or what that's going to look like.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think people on a Kickstarter will pay a premium anyway. I think that some of the inflation has been absorbed through that in an interesting way, just because I think that there's something about the premium components. Because think about it. All right, so we got Wingspan. Let's say when we bought it, it was $60. And I don't know about you, but I've invested probably an equal amount of money with Meeple Source, getting the food and the other pieces, so that I'm not touching cardboard all the time. That's making it a little bit more of an upgraded game, just because it's a game we play a lot and we enjoy it. I wouldn't do that necessarily with every game, but there's certain games that you run across where upgrading the components to upgrade the experience is something you're willing to do. And so a lot of Kickstarters have kind of caught on to that and have made that part of the process.
Yes.
So I actually,
and it's also.
No, go ahead.
It's something that really gets people's attention, because you're like, ooh, it's when this shows up in the stores, it's going to be not quite as premium, not quite the good hand feel and table presence. It'll still be an awesome game, but yeah, if you're drawn into that Kickstarter and really want to get into it, that's yeah.
Well, and I got to tell you, I had my Kickstarter moment of the week. I actually backed 2 Kickstarters this week, which has been kind of quiet lately. So this is a thing.
Okay.
So the first one is Game Toppers 3.5. Berkey, true to his word, came out with another May-based Kickstarter, and it's a leg kit for my gaming table because I've been asking for that.
I saw that was out there.
Yeah, so I decided to go ahead and back it. So I backed it. I followed the rules. And then I realized that the leg kit that I need was not going to happen unless he hit a certain threshold. It had to be unlocked. And I said on the OCD side of me wanted to send them a note and say, hey, what happens if you don't hit the mark? And then I thought, well, it's a 17-day window. So if you're listening to this broadcast and you're interested in a game tabletop or a game table, go to Game Toppers on Kickstarter and take a look at what they have. So again, no endorsement, but happy customer, long time. But then I thought, no, you've got 17 days. If you get down to day 2 and you haven't passed that threshold, ask the question then. And of course, day 3, passed the mark, not a problem. But I was like, what if they don't get there? So that was naivete on my part. But while I was, how Kickstarter is, if you liked this, you might like that. Well, boy, the algorithm has my number because they offered me up The Flood. And it is a board game, as you can imagine. It's based on Noah's Ark. It's got really upgraded meeples. You can, with the right level, you can play up to 6 people, which is the kind of thing I've been looking for. So I'll be kind of curious to see what it's like. It'll be out in 2023 sometime, maybe. But I did back The Flood. So those are the 2 things that I backed this week. Not sure if the Flood is I hate to say it this way, because we'll probably get some flack one way or the other for me saying this, but I've noticed that some people, when they do a religious-based game, if they focus too much on the religious side, I think it makes the quality and the artistic side of the game suffer, because it's like they're putting all their effort into one side versus the other. And that's why there was an RPG, there was a Kickstarter on like making a Bible-based D&D. And I looked at it hard, but it just didn't hit the mark with me, which was unfortunate because that's the kind of thing I would have liked to have seen. Whereas with Flood, it just seemed to go the other way. It looked like more like a game that just happened to use this theme. I'm sorry, I'm talking over you.
Nope. As we discussed earlier, there's this kind of weird delay going on my side, so it's hard to know what's actually going out when. But I think this is true for other settings as well, too. It's not just like a Bible setting. It's if you become too didactic, this is a problem for educational games of whatever ilk. If you're trying to teach a thing as opposed to enjoy the game of the thing. Say you're teaching pollination as opposed to, honey buzz, which has very little to do with pollination actually, but it's a super good game. And if you lean too hard into let's learn about pollination, then you have a activity about pollination and not really a good game.
No, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And I think, when we look at that from my perspective, when we look at it, it's an interesting, it's just interesting the way that the industry goes in terms of people who are inspired to make the content and what inspires them. And I love the fact that people are being inspired by religious themes. In fact, there was a guy out of Georgia that had done D&D with his youth group at an Episcopal church. and that was really, for those of us who grew up in the era of the Satanic Panic, was a very interesting turn of events from my perspective. So anyway, I just like I said, I lost my train of thought a little bit on that, but I think that that is one of the things that I'm curious about in terms of how people generally respond to those kinds of things from that perspective. I don't know. But The Flood was very interesting.
Well,
it's a beautiful game. I encourage you to check it out and see what you think. So let's talk about our fan question.
Yes.
So, all right. Ben Griffith, Dr. Ben Griffith, I should say. A classmate of ours from Wofford. Ben and Amanda, I think they live in the Greenville area. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, they're around here in the upstate.
All right,
I think not quite Greenville proper, but close by.
Yeah, so I'm not, like I said, I'm not 100% sure, but anyway. So Ben writes in, because he can access us on Facebook, because we're those kinds of friends. What game would you recommend for let's try this again. What game would you recommend for new empty nest adults that can be expanded to include the kids when they are home, but without requiring 4,000 hours of, and then you do this instruction, bonus if the game does not create significant bias for the parents who more consistently play?
Yep.
So as somebody who their entire gaming experience has been as an empty nester, I had some significant thoughts on this. So I actually put together a list of top 10 games, and I can read those first, and then you can tell me the ones that maybe didn't quite make your list, James. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to add just a little bit so that when we were talking with him, he had a couple of go-to games for their family that I was thinking about as kind of a baseline. And so he would say they enjoyed Ticket to Ride, Clue, and the Harry Potter Hogwarts battle game. So just to give a sense for people of what kind of rules and complexity that we're thinking about here.
I am so glad you
on Ben's behalf.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought that up, because he messaged me twice. First, he messaged me by myself, and then he messaged you and I together, and I was looking at the other one. So yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, and I think that to a degree, and we've talked about this before, how certain mainstream games still influence our perspective or our perception of what board gaming really is. And we even talked a little bit about it last time about how do you view games like Ticket to Ride as an example. But my games for new empty nesters, so this is not a complete comprehensive list, but my criteria for these games were the following. Number one, do Dale and I play them a lot as a couple? And we do. And have we found that when our daughters are home, we can get them to play these games with us, and it's an easy onboarding into playing the game? And the answer is yes. And so there's not a lot of the 4,000 hours of, and then you do this. So for example, we did Isle of Cats. I think I mentioned to refresh my girls on the Isle of Cats, I pulled up the 3-minute board game review of Isle of Cats, and it brought them right back into the way of thinking around what they should be doing. So anyway, without further ado, here's my list. Number one on my list, as always, is Wingspan, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's the first game we ever got and taught the girls, and it's just such an easy to teach game in my opinion, and it's so accessible, and the theme is just great, and it's, you don't have to be mean to each other, as we say. So we love Wingspan. Second one, Parks, which we.
I love Wingspan as an opening choice. I think one of the things is if you get used to like having a set in your mind of what cards are good combos, or recognizing like, I've got the ravens, the Chihuahua and Raven in my opening hand. I am God among birds now. um, but I still think that's the randomness of the card draw kind of mitigates that quite a bit. So I think that's a super strong opening choice.
And the artwork is so great that it just keeps everybody's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've seen my daughters just sit there and stare at their cards. You know, not because they're strategizing. They're like, wow, how did they draw that? You know? So yeah. I'll try to be more cognizant of the audio issues here and try to pause to give you a chance to comment. So my next one was parks. And parks is meaningful for us for a couple of reasons. Number one, throughout the girls' lives, we've taken them to as many national parks as we've possibly been able to do. And then, of course, the artwork. And so both of my girls are Girl Scout Gold Award winners, which is the highest achievement in Girl Scouting you can ever get. My oldest daughter, Sarah, hers was inspired by the plight of the eastern hemlock and the woolly adelgid that we learned about in the Smoky Mountain National Park. And so
Nice.
You think about, she learned about that because we would go up there every year growing up, and then she gets to be a young adult, and that's what she's passionate about. Parks just settled right into our family dynamic and became this great game that we can go back to over and over again. And all of the genres of parks, whether it's Nightfall, the Trails game, and there's an expansion coming out this summer, just parks. We'll just call it all parks.
I like, one of the things that I like about parks too is that it scales well, right? If you've got two players, you've got different things that happen. When you add players, it changes, which tiles come out, and it becomes a lot more crowded, right? The strategy becomes different if you're playing a 3 or 4 person game than if you're playing 2-player, and I really like that, and I think Ben and Amanda have done a bit of traveling, and I'll bet they're. And again, this is like Wingspan Parks has, again, as you mentioned, that great art and themes that are pretty accessible and settings that are pretty accessible for people who aren't going to say, not so sure about orcs, right?
No, it's true. It's true. It's great because again, we have having 2 daughters, they don't necessarily gravitate towards the more orky things. The third game is one I don't think we've ever talked about, but it's one of the very first games that we ever got, and it's a game that we fell in love with, very similar to the reason that we did Wingspan, and that's Kanagawa. And I don't know if you're familiar with that game. It's a beautiful card placement. You're building out this Japanese drawing, and there's rules and how you paint and all these things, and it's just a very, very, I'm going to say it's a very zen game, which is probably not the right way to say it, but we enjoy it a lot. Haven't played it in a while. I was just thinking about that. It's sat there for a while, but it's one that's definitely on this list for me.
Yeah, and it's not one that I've myself played. I've seen it. It looks absolutely beautiful. And again, no orcs, no spaceships. So,
well, and again, I think it appeals to folks that are driven by the aesthetic nature of games. There's some games for us that have sort of become a gateway to other games. So, for example, Kanagawa for us led us to Colors of Paris, led us to Artsy, led us to Canvas, because we find that there's this whole art genre of games, and I haven't even talked about Pantone or any of those others, but there is that whole genre that there's that aesthetic, and but of all those, from a going back to the rubric that Ben gave us, Kanagawa fit that bill because it's easy to teach, it's a beautiful game, it's family accessible, you don't have to spend a lot of time explaining the rules. And it's got a lot of tactile pieces out of the box that just are very satisfying. You've got the paintbrush, you've got the things you move around, so that kind of thing is just sort of satisfying. Next on my list, and there's like 12 variations of this now. Not really, I'm exaggerating. Is Azul. Azul is one of those games that we can play over and over and over again, and just whether it's a 2-player game or a 4-player game, same kind of thing. And there's a lot to it, and you can kind of, be mean to your other players if you time things appropriately. So anyway, that's one that we enjoy. How do you feel about Azul?
I like Azul a lot, and it sort of picks up the aesthetics theme as well from Kanagawa, right? Because you're putting of course, it has the lovely chunky pieces, and you're setting up this lovely display and sort of making that tiled space on your board, and you're right, it plays differently depending on how many people are playing, and there's a way to be super cutthroat about it, and there's a way to be super friendly about it, and sometimes you just have to be a little cutthroat, but yeah, one that you can easily sit down and bring somebody back up to speed.
Absolutely, and it's one that, like I said, the whole aesthetic of it is fantastic. The next one is, people might be surprised by this next one on the list because there is a level of complexity to this, but I think there's the level of complexity is really offset by the fact that it's pretty accessible and it's pretty intuitive once you kind of get a round under your belt. I always tell the kids, bear with us around, and by the second round you'll fully have it. And to me, that's better than having to spend all the time explaining the rules ahead of time. I just say, let's just jump in. And this one, therefore, matches the rubric because of that, and that's Everdell. We love the characters in the game. We love the fact that you can play it a lot of different ways, and there's just a number of ways to get to victory in Everdell, and we like it, and the girls like it a lot too. And I'm not talking about all the expansions, because like Azul, they have a gazillion expansions and so on and so forth, which is interesting because their expansions are never designed to be played all together. You can either play these two or those two or these three, and it's an interesting kind of dynamic to try to put all that together, and I'll probably get a lot of comments on that too.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that too, because I thought, well, Everdell's it's a beautiful game. It's super fun, and the art's adorable, but there's a lot. There's a sort of worker placement plus tableau builder plus resource management that's kind of like, is it going to be too much? Is it? But the theme, I think you're right. Once you get into it and get that flow, there's not really a whole lot to keep you back. I mean, I think if you're looking at Wingspan, it's probably one more level of complexity. But I think if you're happy with Wingspan, if you're content with Wingspan, if you're good with that, then Everdell's not a bad next step. And so many cards just in the base game to keep you busy for so long.
Well, I think about it too. I thought about viticulture, and I did not put viticulture on this list, and I did put Everdell. And I went back to and then you do this instruction. And I feel like that I don't have to do that as much teaching Everdell like I do viticulture. So of the games that could have been the most complex to put on this list, Everdell beat viticulture based on the way that Ben wrote the question.
I like it.
But the next game is the one we talked about at the beginning, Isle of Cats. Super easy to teach. The girls get it intuitively. Showing, again, the 3-minute board game review was a quick refresher, and we jumped right into the game, and everybody had a great time. And what I did forget, though, is Isle of Cats with 4 people does not move swiftly. So have a plan for dinner before you start. Or plan not to eat.
Yeah. Well, and I love the polyominoes. They have a certain just basic intuitive, like, this is what happens. And I love that it is kind of a fantasy setting theme, right? With all the Isle of Cats and the mean guy trying to capture all the cats. But the spatial sorting things out and building that little, putting everything on the boat in just the right way. And then paying attention, as you noted earlier, to other longer term strategies as well, and not just filling the boat up. Yeah, I like it.
Oh, it's fair. It's fair. So the next game is a little different. It's called Renature. And it's very much a dominoes-ish kind of game, but it's instead of the dots, it's using images of nature. And what's really cool about this game is that everything in the box is recyclable. All of the dominoes are wooden, so they're biodegradable. The cardboard, everything, and then the story is you're reclaiming the environment for nature is the premise. So it's very much a dominoes game, but it also has the tactile appeal of like a mahjong. It's just a really nice way to reimagine a simple game like dominoes in that regard, and we find that's thematically it fits some of the other games that we like to play, as well as just sort of the environmental aspects of it we enjoy.
Yeah, I don't know this one at all, so
I encourage you to check it out. It's a really cool game. Although I did leave out, now that we've brought Wingspan Parks and Isle of Cats on the table, I did leave out my desire to play a marathon of the 3 games at once. We'd call it the cats chasing the birds into the park. So you'd play a round of Isle of Cats, nice, a round of Wingspan, and a round of Parks, and you keep going, and then you total up the score of all 3 games, and that would take forever, but I think it would be an interesting
I was going to say, exercise. Yeah, make sure you have, yes.
Yeah, that's like an afternoon. Start after lunch and have a late dinner. That's how you do that one. Anyway, the next one on my list is Calico. I love that game. It's super easy. It's easy to get out on the table. It's easy to play, and the girls seem to like it, and it fits the aesthetic of they like cats, I guess.
This is one that it's got a lot going on, though, in terms of cognitive load. This is not one that you can just like sit and relax and just sort of drift in and out of conversation with people while you're doing it. It's a hell of a game. It is beautiful. We do have the cats theme going. The one that I might swap out for that would be its sort of younger brother, Cascadia. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which brings us back to the whole parks and wingspan and nature and things outside kind of theme we've got going. But it's a little more just a basic tile, and you got 2 different tiles basically that you're putting down in a turn and setting up those terrain tiles as well as the animals in those different patterns to find your way to victory. But yeah,
I thought about that. I thought about those 2, and I think the difference is we've not played Cascadia with the girls. So I can see your point, and you're right. I don't know if I agree that it limits your ability to have conversation, because we've never let that hold us back. But it also depends on how you view patterns, and if you're somebody that gravitates to, oh, I see the pattern, now I know what I need to do, versus somebody who struggles with that, and that could be, that's a genetic issue potentially. I don't know. But anyway, it's a game we enjoy, and we pull it out a lot.
Oh yeah.
So.
And we've got both Calico and Cascadia. I think they're both fantastic games. I think Cascadia is a little easier to jump into and 100%. Has a lot of sort of interesting and surprising depth between those 2 levels of putting things together and scoring.
No, and I agree with you 100%. And, just for those of you who are not initiated in the world of board gaming, Calico and Cascadia are the same publisher, same designers are involved. A lot of the mechanics are very much the same. And but they're very different games. I would not say that they're carbon copies of one another, but knowing one makes the other one a little bit more accessible. Is a way to think about that. I don't know if you're familiar with this next game on the list, Kohaku.
Yeah. No.
So it is a koi pond game. And it's funny, when my wife and I play games, we were out in a room that's got a big TV that used to be our movie room. Now it's our game room. And so we'll bring up YouTube on the Apple TV, and we'll try to have something on the screen that is thematic with what we're playing. And we found that there's this 3-hour video of nothing but koi pond, the one pond. And we play that in the background, awesome. And you hear the pond, and there's a little Zen music, and we play this game. And it's a tile-based game. You're building your koi pond. There's some limitations to it, but it's really pretty. And it's the kind of game like Dale will take you down to her parents, and it's the kind of game you can quickly not only teach to your kids, but you can also teach your parents. And it's just kind of really, really simple mechanic. But it's pretty, and it's just relaxing, and it's a game worth checking out. Kohaku, Kohaku, nice. I believe. That's what I wrote, but I don't know if I spelled it right. And so I'm bookending my list with Elizabeth Hargraves. So obviously we started the list with Wingspan. We're going to end my list with Mariposas, which is her game about the butterflies, going from Michigan and back, and just the life of the butterflies. It's different than Wingspan. When I first heard about it, I thought, it's going to be a Wingspan for butterflies. It's not that at all. And what I also like about it is that it's got you're thinking about 2 or 3 moves ahead when you're playing this game, kind of like you do in chess. But it's also easy to teach, and it's easy to play with the kids. And so that's why it made the list for me.
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to play it. I've seen it. I know it by reputation. I would love to get it to the table at some point, to somebody to bring that over, but I haven't had a chance to. But it sounds like an excellent, solid choice. Yeah.
So I listed out 10 games. What do you think I left off that should be on that list? Not that you've ever been an empty nester.
No, but just going again, using his rubric and his no, I've got the 13-year-old and the almost a year old, so it's going to be a long time till it's an empty nest around here. But so I was thinking there's a couple of ones that were made a big splash a couple of years ago. They don't always get a lot of love in the sort of heavier duty hobby space, but are really good as a family game. And I think of what Ben offered us as the kind of almost the definition of a family game, right? So looking for Spiel des Jahres winners is probably going to be a good list to look at as well. But I was thinking of like Splendor, which is a very basic kind of almost an engine building with a tableau. Century Spice Road, very simple sort of build and create, changing one thing into another thing to fulfill recipes. I would always recommend the Golem edition because it's got sparkly bits and super fun. Evolution, I think that's it from North Star Games. Lots of good fun stuff there. If you want to go something very family like Pandemic or other Matt Leacock games like Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert, small games like The Game or The Mind. I think those can go a lot of good stuff there. And then going back farther in time, because I feel like I can go back farther in time, right? One I think is going to be impossible to find, but it's called Thurn and Taxis. And when I was teaching it to Laura, I was like, we've played a lot of Ticket to Ride. Would you like to move it up a notch and find something a little different to do? She's like, ooh, I don't know. But then we just played the hell out of Third and Taxes for a while. So, and that's about, I know this is a theme that's going to be riveting. It's about the founding of the postal service in Germany in the, I think, 17th century. It's hilarious, but does good stuff. And then a game that I think is still available pretty widely is called Kingdom Builder. And it's one of the things that's sort of funny about this game is it's you have one card, your hand is one card, and it has a terrain. There's a whole, there are 4 quadrants with different terrains on them. You play down the terrain card, and you have to put 3 houses in that terrain. The trick is that once you've established it, you have to then keep building off from that space. So it's super accessible, super easy. There are a couple of things that sort of change the game each time you set it up. It's a lot of you don't have as much choice as you might like in something heavier or more interesting as like Wingspan or some of the other games we discussed. But it's very accessible, easy to get into. It's not hard to pick back up if you've been away for a school year, or you're just coming back to visit your folks for Easter or Thanksgiving or something. So those go back a little bit, but I thought those would be fun to add to our possible list here.
No, those are good. In fact, it's interesting because you listed a bunch of games that I don't have. Obviously, I listed games that I do have. Interestingly enough, though, we keep looking at the Century editions. We like the way that you put all the covers together. You got one big piece of artwork, very similar to Canvas, which I know is a superficial thing. But it's interesting you put Evolution on there because I don't have Evolution, but I do have Oceans, which is the sequel.
Oh yeah,
and it's not an expansion. Yep. It's totally a sequel, so you don't need one for the other. And we enjoy that game a lot. I did not put it on the list because we haven't played it with the girls yet. They want to because it's a really cool game. But I do like the mechanic of Evolution, and I think that of Oceans, which plays into that whole theme as well. But yeah, I think it's just interesting how. We talked about this at the very beginning of this podcast series where, you've been doing this for a long, long time. I'm a little bit newer to the game, but so that's going to create some diversity in our collections from that perspective.
Well, and that's why I wanted to go back a little ways and pick up a couple of older games to say, hey, there's some pretty good ones.
No, that's great. And I think too, obviously we appreciate Ben and Amanda coming to us with this question. And hopefully our responses have been helpful. Might not be too helpful on your wallet, but all kidding aside, I think there's some really good choices in there for you guys to get started. And then what we need to do is figure out we need to find a good 6-player game. And since we're all in the same geographic areas, figure out how do we all get together and play around. So I can make Wingspan a 6-player game.
Okay.
I have extra mats. And, mats, it's all about mats and resources.
Yeah.
I wish it was a 6-player game. It does take a little longer when you do it 6-player, but we have done it that way before. Just to accommodate people. Anyway, so that's our list. And by the way, for those of you who have other suggestions for Ben and Amanda, please feel free to put them in the comments below. And if you have a question that you would like for James and I to tackle from a board game perspective, because you can see we are so erudite and learned on the topic, we would be happy to spend 30 minutes talking about your question as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, what else, James? What you got?
I think we've had a nice long conversation. I'd be good to step away and see what other conversations we can come up with over the next couple of days. And
I think that sounds great. We are getting into that summer months where the days are longer and the opportunity to play games seems a little bit more upon us in the sense that we have time to get out and do it. And what we've noticed is, we've been talking about, gosh, we should take it down to the pool, or we should take it out on the deck. And of course, my wife doesn't want to take anything out on the deck because she's afraid we'll drop all the little pieces and lose them.
Right on.
Which I'm like, well, we'll put a carpet down. But yeah, no. So it's that time where we're just thinking about what games can we share with other people outside. And we've been talking to the other thing too. And I where we live in North Carolina, the masks are off, the mandates are down. And we have a few couples that we like to invite to meet us at the game store, and like a Sunday afternoon, we'll reserve a table for like 1:00, and we'll go in and play a game with a couple in downtown Pineville, the breweries and stuff like that. So it's just kind of a neat thing to do, and we're hoping to do some more of that this summer. So, well, James, thank you so much for coming with a prepared list to help me answer Ben, and we will.
I try to do my homework.
Yeah, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. We've got some future topics that we want to dig into. We've noticed that with I mentioned about the pandemic restrictions coming down, at least for now. I've noticed that a number of board game cons are coming back, and so we might want to talk about that in a future episode, as well as sticking to our Southern theme. What are some Southern aspects of games that we want to dig into? So with that, I am Joe Mahaffey, one of your hosts, who is not bored but is board gaming, and
I'm James Engelhart. Thanks for listening. May all your tiebreakers break your way.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week or next time or whenever.
Bye.